Welcome to Chandler in Focus. I'm Councilmember Rick Heumann. My guest today is Chandler City Manager Marsha Reed. Welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for coming out today.
You're welcome.
Today we're going to get to know more about Marsha and learn about her role and vision as the city continues to grow and more diverse. And for people who don't know, that we are in a city manager form of government, which is a little different than, say, a New York City that's a mayor form of government where the mayor runs everything. But you're really our CEO of the organization and stuff. So want to kind of get together today a little bit and talk about that so people have a full understanding. So you were appointed city manager just a few months ago, April 14th, 2016. Why don't you share your background, though, so everybody kind of knows?
Sure. Well, Councilmember, as you're well aware, I came from Texas. My background is actually, I started way back in 1983 with the Texas Department of Transportation. So I came through transportation planning, worked as an engineer for TxDOT, and then later got back into transportation planning. And then at a point in time, some legislation changed and they moved that position to the city of Lubbock. And although I did not have to go, it was one of those things that I really enjoyed doing. So I went to the city of Lubbock in 1993 and served in many capacities and finished there as chief operating officer right prior to moving to Chandler. And so moved to Chandler in 2013 and as assistant city manager, and mayor and council appointed me acting when our former manager retired, and then the final appointment. So yeah, my background primarily is in engineering, and then I also have a master's in public administration.
It's been over 3 years, so that's amazing.
Yes, about 3.5 years.
It goes real quick. And so explain, I mentioned a second ago about how we are a city manager form of government versus a strong mayor form of government. Explain your role as the city manager to our residents.
Well, as you said, primarily the city manager operates as the chief executive officer of the organization. And, where many cities, especially in the Southwest, are typically council manager form of government, the managers really are there to carry out the policy decisions as made by city council members. So, it is ultimately mayor and council's responsibility to set the ultimate vision and set those policies. And I see the role of city managers to make sure they're carried out in the most efficient manner.
And it's different, even though the people who report to council really are you, our city attorney, our city clerk, our magistrate are the people who report directly to, and then you basically, all the employees and everybody funnels up through you and stuff. So, people think, well, how come the council doesn't get something done? I mean, you're right, we are the policy people, but you guys are the ones who execute the policy for and stuff. So what made you decide to move from Texas to here?
Well, it's probably a little bit interesting and probably different than what a lot of people might think it was. But actually, my husband and I were both at a time in our lives where the timing of the move looked like something, if we wanted to do, we'd need to do it within a certain amount of time. We both actually had a long career with the city of Lubbock. We actually met there many years ago. So we'd had a long career there. We both grew up in Texas, both on the same street actually, but didn't know each other until working for the city of Lubbock. So anyway, at the point in time, we have 3 children that are much older and were in college or out of college. We had one still in elementary school, and we thought, well, unless we want to live in Lubbock our entire lives, which neither one of us did, it was time to actually look for the possibility of going somewhere else. And so anyway, we were very choosy, and I will tell you that. And we came out and visited Chandler prior to the interview process taking place for assistant city manager, and both really fell in love with the city. And so, yeah, I guess that's how we ended up here. A little bit different than probably what some people might think.
Hey, we're glad to have you. It's interesting. People move for different reasons. Some people just want to move up the ladder, but it's great that when somebody wants to move here because of the right reasons versus just a stepping stone someplace else and stuff. So was your family excited?
I would say yes and no. Obviously most of our family is still there.
Right.
And, but as I said, our older kids were grown and have lives of their own. And, you probably see them as much now. It's probably more quality now because when you go, you get to actually visit with them than, the drive-bys that you got a lot. So anyway, but yeah, I mean, they were excited for us, but sad to see us leave. And I know they enjoy us coming back.
Yeah, so you still have that Texas accent. So
I can't, after 50 years, it's hard to get rid of.
And stuff. So, since locating in Chandler, it's over 3 years ago now, you've definitely become familiar with what the city and state has to offer. What are some of the similarities between Lubbock and Chandler?
Yeah, well, people probably don't realize, of course, that Lubbock is a cotton community. I mean, that's been the bread and butter in Lubbock from the beginning.
Right.
Same thing here in Chandler, which is kind of surprising looking at the city today.
Yeah, you wouldn't know that. Yeah.
Right, but
Yeah.
it came from an agricultural background. So
Okay.
that was a similarity, typical to a lot of cities in the Southwest. Both are pretty much laid out on grid patterns. Lubbock, same thing as here, arterials every mile, collectors half miles, I mean, that sort of thing. So typically the Southwest, you'll see a lot of that unless it's in the middle of the mountains or something. So the similarities were really both more Southwest type cities.
How big is Lubbock?
The population's about 230,000.
So it's running, yeah. So when you came, we were about 235, probably 240 then.
Correct.
So
Right.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
What are some of the big differences, though?
Differences, I see Chandler as a place where the mayor and council has actually set the vision. It's definitely more of a high-tech type community. Being a suburb of the Phoenix metropolitan area makes a big difference, obviously, where Lubbock was isolated in the Panhandle for the most part by itself. So, the reliance on the neighboring communities is much different here than where I came from. But ultimately, it was the fact that, here there's definitely the desire for jobs, good jobs, and a good quality of life. Where in Lubbock, although a great city and I was born and raised there, quality of life is typically not the highest in priorities in Lubbock as it is here. So we've enjoyed that a lot.
Right. What about the difference between Texas and Arizona? Is it you finding big differences between Texas and Arizona now, or?
Yeah, of course, the primary one is going to be, Texas is a property state. I mean, they're all about the property you own, and taxes are accordingly. So there's a big property tax in Texas, where here you have the state income tax that kind of is basically a wash, but that is a big difference a little bit when it comes to philosophical background on legislation and things like that.
It is funny. Everybody talks about our tax code, and everybody likes to pinpoint where we're higher, but they don't want to pinpoint where we're a lot lower too.
Correct.
And stuff. So, and property taxes there, just like a lot of places, are probably just ridiculous. So,
yes,
yeah.
much higher, especially at the state level.
Right. You got to, you have to pay for services and stuff. It gets paid for one way or the other and stuff. So.
Correct.
We just finished updating our build out and general plan, and we're definitely becoming mature and stuff. So talk about the general plan a little bit, and our voters obviously liked it because we had an 85% approval when we did it. So talk a little bit about the general plan and some of the things that are in there for our residents.
Well, as you know, this was kind of an update to the prior general plan because we are getting low in terms of land in the city. And so, it really focused more on livability, I would say. A healthy community was another emphasis out of the general plan. And, some of those specific employment corridors and transportation corridors were, I think, better defined as part of this general plan that might have been in the previous one. And so, definitely we're going to see some changes with the South Mountain 202 in terms of our far west part of our city, I think, from an economic development standpoint and a transportation standpoint. And there may be other opportunities there. And it addressed some of those things that had been kind of been made policy but weren't really part of the general plan, especially along the Arizona Avenue corridor, both relying that more on more of a, everybody understands it is going to be kind of I'll call it a hodgepodge of development, especially between Arizona and the railroad tracks as you go south of the 202.
Right.
So it kind of emphasized that and secured that as part of our general plan. So it leaves a lot of flexibility, I think, for future councils to make good decisions when it comes to zoning.
And people have to understand it's a general plan.
It is,
There are
very
areas
much.
that obviously are designated for certain things, but there's still capabilities of maneuvering within that. But it gives people an idea that if you have residential and you want to put an industrial plant there, you're going to have to go through a lot of hoops and bells, maybe even try and change it. But it gives people the flexibility to be able to do stuff. And it's changed. I mean, the freeway corridors have changed immensely what's gone on in our city that, with Alma School and, things we've done over the last year or so in terms of the adaptive reuse to be able to go back and relook at some of the stuff in Arizona Avenue that, 25 years ago, that was a state highway, so it's really changing stuff. So in terms of, some of the opportunities and the challenges with the general plan and what you see for the city over the next few years?
This is what I would say, and we are a very progressive community in terms of jobs. And I think the general plan just, again, emphasized that in order to bring good jobs here, we need a good quality of life. And as I mentioned earlier, that was one of the draws for us personally. But I think that that is going to be something that we're going to have to, it's going to be really hard to raise the bar from an A to an A plus.
Right.
But I think that that's something that, as we continue on, we're going to have to continue to look at that. And just, again, the changing desires of the community. I'll take, for instance, our park system where, playgrounds and things like that. And although they're extremely important, kids today are much different than kids 30 years ago and what they wished for when they went to a park. So in some cases, I think we're going to have to continue to be adaptable. And as we look at some of these things and they're being revisited, we're going to have to look at that and try to come up with new and creative ideas for some of our quality of life things we have out there.
And because you're right, it does change. I mean, it's now with a Pokemon hunt or whatever
Right.
they do. I've never got into that, but in terms of the parks. But yeah, part of the general plan is designating park areas, and I think one of the things and the Price Road corridor. Talk about the different. We have major nodes, I guess you want to call them. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of those, like Price Road and the airport and things like that, so people understand what those are protected for?
Sure. Well, we'll start with Price Road because I think that's the most known corridor. And of course, the Price Road, the vision of mayor and council long before I got here, and as you're
long
well
before I got
aware,
here too. Yeah,
many years ago, was just really set that aside for campus-like facilities, large businesses that would want to come in there and have single tenant was the original emphasis for the corridor.
Right.
Although the general plan did change that slightly, I know it's still a great desire that we continue that campus-like environment and give those companies that need that or want that an opportunity there. So to me, that's kind of a very specific corridor that we have available for companies that still look for that aspect as they're trying to find their locations. And then around the airport is another one. And of course, around our airport is much different because we're trying to create an environment more lends itself to industry, something that might lend itself for airport use. And those types of things. So you see a lot of flex industrial type buildings going up around the airport. And I think we're going to continue to see that. And, they could be either office development or industrial development. But certainly that has been targeted for that area around the airport just for a lot of reasons. But one everybody knows best is the noise associated with any airport.
Right.
You've got our downtown, which I think is, of great importance for the city. Any city has got to have a good, competent core in the downtown. And I think our downtown now is really going towards more, I will call it the millennial, more urbanized feel. It gives a different livability aspect that a lot of people are looking for these days, especially the younger people that are entering the workforce, and they want to be where they can walk to work, they can walk to entertainment and those sort of things. So, with the help of mayor and council setting those goals and policies for downtown, I think we'll continue to see more of the Alta Steel Yards being developed. And as you're well aware, we've got a couple more apartment complexes, and we've had some businesses actually locate in downtown Chandler. As recent as just this week, we had another business that specifically wants to be in downtown Chandler. So I think that we're starting to see that, and a lot of that groundwork that was laid many years ago.
Right.
I think over the next probably 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a lot of that come into fruition in our downtown. And then we've got the northern corridor, which a lot of people kind of tend to forget about.
Right.
But northern Arizona, we have a lot of employment up there in that area that again, people may forget about because a lot of it's been there for a while,
Right.
but we've seen some turnover and we've seen some new companies coming in there. And so I know Micah Miranda, our Economic Development Director, works diligently on all of these, but certainly that's an area we don't want to forget about.
Right.
And then, of course, our Chandler Mall, I mean, it is a regional mall. We've got a lot of good development coming around there. The Viridian development broke another on their phase 2 development just last week. So that area, we've got to keep viable for the future of Chandler. Much of our sales tax revenue comes off of that area.
Right.
And it's important to us to keep that viable for the future. And with the, I'll call it an attack on retail, but it's really a lot more online purchases. we've got to just, again, continue to make that viable.
We've got to make sure that that's it. I have no shot at Mesa, but Fiesta Mall and a lot of the other malls around the country that have just gone by the wayside because they didn't keep up and the neighborhood changed and stuff. So
Right.
Chandler Mall is really important to us and stuff. So just real quick, just for you joining us right now, I'm Councilmember Rick Heumann. I'm joined today by City Manager Marsha Reed, and we're talking about the city in general. So we're in the middle of talking about the general plan. So keep going. So
well, the last and certainly not the least is West Chandler.
Right.
You know, the opportunities up and down I-10 are very good. We've got a lot of auto dealers over there, but we also have a lot of our big developments over there in terms of commercial. We have a lot of industrial area over there. And as I mentioned earlier, I think with the South Mountain 202, there may be some additional opportunities for some conversion or redevelopment in some of those areas. So that was specifically added to this year's general plan.
Right. That general plan, so people understand, it's like you talk about important nodes. Price Road Corridor does protect the Price Road Corridor. There's no residential plan in there. The Air Park area plan. It's not going to, the airfield isn't going to grow to be, Sky Harbor. It's not, that's never going to happen. Those are protected in those kinds of things in the general plan. So in West Chandler you mentioned, and I was by there last night, REI is moving from Tempe into Chandler. Needed a bigger space, more by the freeways and that kind of thing. So that's a great opportunity for us and stuff. So talk about some of the challenges and stuff that you've been city manager now for 6 months. You've been here longer than that, but talk about some of the challenges you see with the position or just the city in general.
Yeah, well, a couple of challenges I see, and I look at them, really they're challenges, but they're also opportunities. The city exploded in the 1990s, early 2000s, and so much of the city was developed at one time or one decade of time. And so, we're approaching the 20-year mark from that decade. And so what we're starting, or probably will start to see if we're not very careful, is some need for maintenance and ongoing upkeep and rehab to a lot of our either facilities or our parks areas or streets. Our neighborhoods are going to be very important and key. So I think continuing to work with both the traditional and the homeowner associations that we have out there is going to be really important, because again, a lot of those structures, meaning homes that were developed in those times, are going to reach that point where we're going to need to see a lot of maintenance on those. So I know our neighborhood resources department works again very hard to make sure we provide every opportunity we can, but I think we're also going to have to look and see if there's any city infrastructure types of things that might need to be done in some of those areas, again, to help keep them viable, because we want to keep bringing in good jobs, and everyone looks at all of that in our neighborhoods. So I think that's one area. In terms of challenges, again, I think that, internally, we may get to some of that, but just, again, the 25-year mark is a difference in terms of the organization as well. So I think we're going to have some challenges there. And then, again, we're going to have competition where we haven't seen it in the past. We're already seeing it with our neighboring cities that are growing, where we're almost to build out now. I think just the competition for those jobs and some of those type of things are going to be more important, that we really are positioned well to continue to bring and attract business to our city.
Right, and one of the things this council's done a really good job about and having you execute is our infrastructure reserve. Things like, it's easy to, I won't say easy, it's easier to build new roads with capital, but it's the maintenance part of it. People have to understand when you add another lane of traffic down the road, you have to reseal that, you have to eventually repave it, and all those things cost money and stuff. So you touched on a couple of projects, but talk about a few things that are happening in the city in terms of maybe road construction. I know McQueen's being finished up, some of the roads in Southeast Chandler, just some general projects that maybe they're going to happen.
Right, so some of our larger things that we have going on, definitely our arterial streets in the southeast part of the city are important. We're tackling those basically a mile at a time. We have some more coming up. McQueen Road, for example, Ocotillo Road will be the next. And then, we get so far out as we'll even have to touch Lindsay at some point. We've got Gilbert Road completed. Cooper Road is another one that's on the horizon, along with Chandler Heights. So, we're trying to methodically build those arterials in the southeast part of the city without just causing so much problem. Because, you know, I tell a lot of people my favorite color is orange, but it's not a lot of people's favorite color when
Right.
it comes to barricades and that sort of thing. And much of that part of the city's been encompassed with barricades with the
Right.
Gilbert Road construction and others. So we'll continue to do that. Another thing that we're doing that a lot of people probably aren't aware of is our big public safety training facility. That you know, we're working, both police department along with our fire, health, and medical department are working together on South Dobson to add to the public safety training facility we have out there. Phase 1 hopefully will be going out to bid actually here shortly, but there's about 3 more phases to that we'll be looking to do for the future. So we have those as well. We have the continuation of our park development in our neighborhood parks. And then, you know, eventually we'll be looking at some upgrades to Snedeker Park. This year we're going to be looking at a study for our senior center. So, you know, we're going to be touching kind of all areas. And that's not even to mention our downtown, where we have many projects on the capital program, including a new parking garage that we're moving forward with at this point, after getting mayor and council direction to go ahead and move forward sooner than later with that.
Well,
So,
I mean, a lot of things
yeah,
happening. It
there
keeps
is.
everybody busy, and people don't realize that for people who moved here in the last 5 or 10 years, Chandler was the fastest growing city from about 1998 to 2005, and there were times that literally they were stringing street lights or traffic lights from poles just because it was growing so fast. So it's easy to snap your fingers, but you could not build the roads fast enough in that part of the town and stuff. So. How are the demographics? You mentioned the senior center a little bit. Demographics changing after the last census and stuff. What are you seeing in terms of that and stuff?
So with the last mid-decade census that was just completed, what we've noticed is that we are increasing slightly in age. And of course, I say that it was only 5 years since that decennial census. So, you know, to have a 2 or 3 year increase over that short amount of time definitely lends itself to the fact that we may be changing in terms of demographics and are seeing that. And so we've got to be looking into the horizon as to the needs of the community and how can we address those. Because as you mentioned, these things don't happen overnight. It takes many years even for a capital project to be constructed. So in a lot of cases, so we just need to start and pay really particular attention to those changing demographics out there and how we're going to continue to meet that.
And that's part of the Mayor's Four Corner project, looking at some of these different areas, because what seems to be happening, and happens in my neighborhood, people aren't moving. I mean, people love Chandler. Their kids are getting older, and they're going like, no, I'm not going anywhere. You know, maybe when they get to 75 where they want to downsize, but people are staying in their neighborhoods. So you don't, and so the challenge is going to be with schools, that the schools face that. There's less kids maybe being, you know, that are there. Everybody's kids are older. And my block, for example, we used to have all these families. We all moved in 21 years ago, and now everybody's kids are gone. So, you know, everybody talks about government regulations and whatever and stuff. Talk about a little bit about some of the stuff that the city's worked on and continues to work on. For example, we're re-looking at our sign code right now. Talk about some of those kinds of things that I think this council's done a good job, and you guys have carried it out real well, of looking at regulations that don't make sense anymore because things have changed so much. Can you touch on that a little bit, or?
You know, it's one of those things that we're going to have to continue to adapt. And definitely the code, you know, gets modified regularly, I will say, from zoning and those sort of things. But in terms of the code itself, I know that it has been a priority of council to take a look at that, because some of those things may not make sense that made sense 15 or 20 years ago, or just may need to be tweaked to make more sense today. So you're right, we're taking a look at our sign code right now. We recently addressed mobile food trucks because that kind of came on the horizon very quickly. And that was about an 8-month process. So, you know, changing and creating new codes, the state taking over our tax collections, I mean, we're going to have to revisit that. And it'll be everything from the new reorganization of the staff to bigger items such as our sign code that we're going to have to look at.
And people have to realize that's the biggest challenge. And, you know, I use the word cutting edge, not bleeding edge, because what's the new buzz thing right today, 2 years from now might be outdated. So you have to be careful about how you update certain things and stuff. So you touched on the staff a little bit, and we've had, I don't want to use the word turnover, but we've had a lot of people that have been here a long time that are starting to retire. And talk a little bit about that, and what the plans are in terms of. You guys have worked on plans, as some of our great staff have left for retirement. So
Right. And I will say hats off to the previous administration in terms of succession planning, because it has, because again, of a lot of employees coming on board during that boom period, they're now reaching that magic 20, 25 years where they're looking to possibly retire. And we knew that was coming. And so the previous manager definitely set up a succession planning program. We've completed a number of those. We just recently, just last week, graduated 80-something out of our first mentoring program.
that's great.
So we're doing a lot of things with our human resources to help develop our current employees if they want to have a career path that moves them in a different direction or up, or however that might be the case. So you're right, we've had a lot of turnover in terms of retirements, again, all planned for the most part.
There's a difference between turnover and retirement.
Correct,
Yeah, right.
correct,
So,
yeah. And, one of the first places we've seen, and I think we've gotten over the hurdle in public safety, both police and fire. If you look at the administrations all the way down to officer level, and in fire down to firefighters,
Right.
we've had a huge amount, and it's not even the same faces in a lot of cases, especially in the administration side, that we saw just 2 years ago. And all of those were due to retirements. And so, happy for them, but it does create kind of a void when it comes to the amount of knowledge that we see going out the door, but it's also an opportunity for fresh ideas. So we look at that as a positive. In terms of the city as a whole, just since January 1st, we've had 60 retirements this year, which is, throughout the organization, that's quite a few.
Average amount of years some of those people work, 25,
Yeah, I would guess probably around the 25 mark would
Yeah.
be probably a good average.
Barbara Young just retired 28 years, but
Right,
so it's
yeah.
not people leaving after 5 or 6 years. People are
No.
leaving after a lot of long term.
A
So
full career here at the city, which is great. I will tell you from the executive team level, I was looking at this just the other day, and we have about a dozen on our executive team, and 75% of those have changed or changed positions since I came 3 years ago. So you can tell there's, again, a lot of the knowledge has left, but a lot of it is we're gaining some really good people.
A lot of homegrown people too, in some cases.
Yeah. We've been able to bring some from the outside, but definitely we're hiring the best people for the job. Yeah.
And that's the corporate culture, as I call it in Chandler, or the Chandler culture that, I've been on council 8 years, but there's been councils for years prior to that, and there's always been this corporate culture of fiscal responsibility. We survived the recession with no layoffs, no furloughs, any of those kinds of things, AAA bond ratings, and I think that's one of those kinds of things that you've, I think, done a great job. But it's about the culture. It's taking care of citizens, taking care of what's going on, and not being all over the board. That's why I think you get an 85% vote from the general plan, which there are cities that it's failed.
Correct.
And so I think that's really for people, to understand that whole kind of thing and stuff. So we're running out of time. We could probably talk a zillion things about the different city and stuff. So, but I really want to thank you for coming out and giving our citizens a little snippet of what's going on. And as we wrap this up, this is my last probably show as Councilmember Rick Heumann. I enjoyed this immensely to be able to meet people like Marsha and talk about different things in the city. So with that, until another time, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.